Well, hi. My name is Marco Piergentili and I graduated as a building and land surveyor in Italy in 1981. And immediately I started my 2 years mandatory apprenticeship period in the professional studio of a building and land surveyor or a civil engineer or architect, having more than 10 years experience. And then, after this mandatory period of apprenticeship, I took the exam and I enrolled in the role of building and land surveyor. In the exam I get 89 over 100 as an overall score. Well, after I immediately started working as a building and land surveyor. In the first 3 years, from 1988 to 1991, 3-4 years actually, I carried out 3 major projects and a few other small projects. Well, the most important projects were the restoration of churches, the restoration of an old stable to change its use into a guest house in the park of a big villa, and the construction of an industrial building with the owner's dwelling attached. Well, apart from these 3 projects, I also carried out a project prepared a project and carried out supervision of work, cost estimation, everything for the construction of a sewerage line on a public road. And well, apart from all these projects where I was in charge for the concept design, cost estimation, work supervision, quantity survey, cadastral paperwork, land survey, everything basically, except for calculation of structure. Apart from this, I carried out a lot of land survey job for cadastral purposes, but not only for cadastral purposes, also for more general purposes. For example, I staked out 16 kilometers of gas duct, high pressure gas duct for the Italian oil and gas company Bonatti. Bonatti is one major company in the oil and gas sector. And I also carried out the land survey for development plan, also including more than 1 kilometer roads, the land survey for the project of a new hippodrome, the land survey for to report in the cadastral map the position of 15, I think, water spring for the water works company of Piceno province. Well, the survey work was needed to report in the map the real position, the exact position of the water springs in order to create an area where the human activity were limited, in order to safeguard the purity of, to preserve the purity of the water, of course. Well, apart from this, I also carried out another 8, maybe 7, 8 land survey, contour line plan, transversal sections, you know, for 8 exhausted quarry. And these land survey jobs, those land survey jobs were meant very propedeutical to the preparation of landscape engineering in order to recover the area of these 8 exhausted quarries. That's it for the first 4 years, and then in 1992 I went abroad for better incomes, higher revenue, better experiences, and I went in South America, Ecuador, with an Italian engineering company which is Lotti and Associated, one major engineering company in the field of Italian engineering company in the field of engineering. In Ecuador I was chief land surveyor, and apart from staking out all the pipeline for the irrigation plan, the project was an irrigation plan, was about an irrigation plan. And apart from the staking out of the pipeline, I also carried out several land survey jobs for soil conservation, soil reclamation along the river. And what was much more important, I carried out an inspection of a big irrigation canal, 40 kilometers long, with 10 kilometers of tunnels partially collapsed. The canal had a flow of 6 cubic meters per second. After the inspection, I prepared a preliminary project with cost estimation for the rehabilitation of the entire canal, and I also took part to several meetings for the work planning of this rehabilitation work. Well, that's all for this experience in Ecuador, because after a little bit more than 1 year the work stopped. The work stopped because of two situations, the combination of two different situations. There was the economic crisis in Italy in 1992 and 1993, in combination with a major corruption case that was very well known at that time under the name of Tangentopoli, which in combination with the economic crisis caused the Italian international cooperation from Ministry of Foreign Affairs stop the financing, the funding of our project, as many other projects, and we were sent home. I came back home and I started again working as a freelance surveyor, building and land surveyor. I carried out from 1994 to 2006, I carried out something like 13, 15, something like this projects. I tried to list some of them, the most interesting. One was about the construction of another industrial building with the owner's dwelling attached, the enlargement of an existing industrial building, the rising and enlargement of a residential building, the refurbishment of 2 semi-detached country houses, the partial refurbishment, restoration of a big country villa, well, the maintenance work in a block of flats, the construction of an apartment building, including 7 apartments. Well, what else? The restoration of the partial restoration of an old historical building to change the use of part of this building into a pizza restaurant. Well, another project quite interesting was the project for soil conservation, soil reclamation after a huge flood, and also another small project about the rehabilitation of country roads after the same huge flood as before. Well, this is about the project I carried out, but in the same period of time, from 1994 to 2006, I also carried out, completed more than 100, I think, land survey jobs for cadastral purposes, and also the inscription of more than 50 or 60, something like this, buildings in the register of building, cadastral register of buildings. Well, apart from the land survey for cadastral purposes, I also carried out land survey for other purposes, like for example for the geophonic investigation of the soil included between a tunnel and the external hillside. The land survey job for monitoring a landslide, a land survey for the revamp of a shooting range, the land survey for two development plans, the land survey to solve boundary conflicts, land survey of 12 kilometers of river, and several land survey jobs. After this period of time, in 2007, I went abroad again, in search for, as before, better revenue, better incomes, higher incomes, better experiences. And I went to work in Nigeria with Salini Impregilo, the major Italian company, construction company. In Nigeria I was the chief land surveyor in a project, for the construction of a complex of building in downtown Abuja, the federal capital of Nigeria. The complex of buildings included the Millennium Tower, a high-rise building, the National Square with 2 underground story car park, and a cultural center. Well, particularly complicated in this project was the setting out of the plates to hang the tie rods between the 3 concrete reinforced cylinders that constitute the main bearing structure of the Millennium Tower. Well, at the end, after 1.5 years, basically, the Nigerian government stopped funding the project. The company shut down the construction site and sent everybody home. I was dismissed, like everybody else, almost everybody else. And I went to Afghanistan immediately to work with the SFG, an army contractor. I went to Kabul, where I finished the construction of a big military canteen, 800 square meters, with state-of-the-art kitchen machinery, a very nice project. And at the same time I was working in the completion, the implementation of a project for the construction of a big defensive wall, 650 meters long, 4 meters high and 1 meter thickness, a defensive wall for a military base. When I finished both these projects, I was sent to, well, of course, in these 2 projects I was the project manager. I was the only representative of the company there in Kabul. So I was the project manager, the administrative manager. I was taking care of everything: procurement, logistics, quantity survey, work supervision, everything basically. Well, after I had finished these 2 projects there in Kabul, I was sent to Herat. In Herat, I was in charge for the construction of a 2-story building with modular housing units. It was an office building where Italian Army and US Army were working together, basically. And then I was in charge of the rising of 2 office buildings, and also for the assemblage, the installation, if you prefer, of an antenna building 25 meters high. Well, when these 3 projects were finished, I was project manager also in those projects. You know, administrative manager, quantity surveyor, everything, work supervisor. Well, when those 3 projects were finished, I was sent to a small military base in a very dangerous area. It was a military base for the training of Afghan police, and I went there to prepare a preliminary project with cost estimation for the refurbishment of the entire military base. When I was finished, I sent all the documentation in PDF to the Japanese embassy, who was meant to fund this project, and the Japanese embassy agreed to fund the project on the basis of my documentation. And after that I went back to Herat and I resigned from this company, because at that time I thought it was the best thing to do, because I was thinking that that company wasn't reliable actually. So I resigned and I went to work immediately for a bigger company, ESCO International, a company with more than 2,000 employees, and I was sent immediately to work in Shindad for the construction of a military camp for the American troop. I worked there 20 to 30 days, and then I went back to Herat for a much more important project. They were 3 projects actually, for the revamp of Herat Military Airport and Civil Airport as well. And well, in these 3 projects I was the deputy project manager, and I was in charge for the work supervision, partially also for the quantity survey and for the land survey particularly, and I also was helping with laboratory tests on soil, aggregate, concrete, for example Proctor test, sand cone, Atterberg limits, sieve analysis, CBR on soft sample, saturated sample that is, and you know, CBR on site with the clag impact soil testers. What else? I don't know. The Abrams cone, of course, the bearing plate for the soil, and also the bearing test on concrete samples. That's it. As for the land survey, I prepared all the land survey report on the smoothness of the sub-base, tube binder course, last wearing course. The land survey report were for NSPA agency of NATO, in order to approve the continuation of work with other more lots of asphalt. And of course they were mandatory, because there was a QC plan to respect, and there were strict prescription for the smoothness of the surfaces. Apart from this, well, what to say, the project was about the extension of the airport, the runway of the airport, the installation of an arrestor gear for emergency landing of military aircraft, the construction of a new hammerhead, the installation of a new lighting plant, including the approaching light, also the puppy light, the construction of 2 new taxiways, an apron for military planes, and a logistic area, the enlargement of 2.5 kilometers of existing runway, the reshaping of the lateral shoulders, and the construction of at least 3 kilometers of drainage. Well, this was a very interesting project, but I was also working as a project manager in a few minor projects, like for example the construction of a logistic platform I was a project manager there in that case, and I carried out an inspection in the surrounding of the Herat airport to spot the right place for this logistic platform. Once I had found the right place, I carried out the land survey job, prepared the project and cost estimation, and then I carried out the supervision of work, quantity survey and everything. Apart from this, I also prepared the project and cost estimation for the enlargement of an existing bull fuel installation at a military airport, and prepared the project and cost estimation and carried out the supervision of work for the construction of a two-story office and residential buildings, mixed building. And also prepared the project, cost estimation, supervision of work, everything for the construction of a small industrial laundry. I prepared the project and cost estimation for the construction of a bunker, and I was helping also for the installation of an asphalt plant. And that's basically it for the work in Afghanistan, for my work in Afghanistan. At the beginning of 2013 we were sent home because we were dismissed, because NATO ISAF mission was about to end. There were no more consistent, considerable investment in the construction in Afghanistan, so we were dismissed. I came home and I solved some family problem in 2013 and at the beginning of 2014, and then late in 2014 I started again working in Padova in the construction of two industrial buildings to house the plants for two big hospitals. Actually, these two projects were about to end when I arrived at the construction site. I was actually the project manager assistant. I was working, I was carrying out work, I was in charge for quantity survey and for work supervision, and I also helped with some CAD drawings, and also I was helping in the procurement office. Well, this job was meant to be propedeutical to my leaving for Libya, because this is what I was asking to the company who called me there. The company was actually Senalpa Construction, a group of two companies, Siram from Milan and Gemmo Impianti from Vicenza. I was called there by Gemmo Impianti as a propedeutical experience to my contract for Libya. But just at the end, at the beginning actually, 2015, January, I had already got my visa. The company sent me my passport with the visa, and also I signed the contract, but in January for Libya. And then unfortunately in February the Italian embassy left Libya because the situation in Libya got worse, much worse, and it was impossible to go there to work. And so I missed this job opportunity, my possibility to work in Libya vanished, and late in 2015, recently actually, I was called by Polytechnic Engineering, another major Italian engineering company, for a small, short-term consultancy job in Turkey as a quantity surveyor in the project for the construction of a tea research and application center funded by the European Union. Well, I went there and came back, and this relationship with Polytechnic is supposed to continue They told me they are going to call me for a couple of more short-term consultancy jobs in Turkey, and maybe at the end of this year, November, December, or sometimes in January 2016, but this is not sure yet. Well, I'm sorry I made you wasting your time listening to me. I thank you very much, and goodbye.